Let's take a look then at how the bookies have things. The US favourites, even on money to advance. Iran 3-1, a draw, of course, which would be good for Iran as well. At 12-5. For more on this, it's like someone who loves alliteration will love who we have on now, because it's Taylor Twelman and Casey Keller to look ahead to this game. Casey, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I think it's a great progression from the second half in the Wales game to what we saw in the energy levels in the England game. So I think that gives a lot of people a lot of hope that the U.S. can then take it one step further and see this game out. Yes, it seems like all the stuff off the field seems to be building. There was the issue with Klinsmann and Kirosh the other day, and then the flag issue, and then the crazy press conference and the questions that were asked to Greg and Tyler Adams. So, yeah, it seems like whatever they can do to wind this game up a little bit more seems to be happening. But, in the end, it's really just, two groups of players who understand that they need to perform on the day to get a result to go through in the World Cup. Yeah, the geopolitical stuff aside, just go perform. And that's what I want from the U.S. team, just to make sure that you have a good group of players in the right mentality who are ready for what's such a big game, and just to make sure that you perform on the day.
And in that performance, if they want to go through, they have to score, Taylor. Who's up top for you? How do you line this side up to get the best out of this US squad?
I'm surprised, I think all of us are, that we're sitting here talking about the final group stage game for the United States, and Giovanni Reyna has had very little to do with anything. And even Brendan Aronson, to a certain extent, hasn't played as much as everyone. And I'm not sitting here telling you that Pulisic or Weah haven't been good, but through the middle, the number 9 position has been a real problem for the United States, and in particular under Greg Berhalter in his tenure. And there was a lot of scuttlebutt about whether or not Ricardo Pepi should have gone or whatnot, but he didn't score a goal for over 14 months. There is not a single player for the United States in that 9 position that has scored goals regularly. And so the first game he went with Sargent, the second one he went with Wright. I'd be stunned if he doesn't go with Jesus Ferreira, because it seems like right now that Greg Berhalter's looking at his squad and saying, you know what, I'm going to throw the chips in the air and see what lands. In saying that, I think you've got to be a little different here, because Iran's going to sit in and defend. Carlos Queiroz is going to sit in and say, go ahead, try to break us down. And that is the one thing where Greg Berhalter, throughout the entire World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF, they struggled to break down teams that sat in the low block. So Jesus Ferreira gives them a little bit more nuance. But if you're not playing Brendan Aronson from the start and Giovanni Reyna's not coming in at halftime, if you're scoreless, then honestly, Dan, I don't know what we're doing, because quite honestly, your best players are the 5 or 6 players in the midfield. And if you need to take a center forward off to get your best players on the field, that gives you the most odds of scoring a goal. And right now, they haven't looked that dangerous, even though they played well against England.
So how could you work it, Taylor? Could you have almost an Aronson, Pulisic, Gio Reyna 3 floating in as a false 9? Is that an answer maybe to what we're looking for here? Because as you say, you need quality up front for an Iran side that's going to be sitting in.
Yeah, I mean, you could play Pulisic through the middle, because at times, even though he hasn't played well there, he's played that position for Chelsea. And this is against the low block. Against Morocco in the friendly that we did on ESPN, I suggested the idea of Timothy Weah through the middle. But against Iran, there's not a ton of space in behind, so that doesn't work. But I think you've got to get more players between the ears that are very competent in finding spaces, combining, and trying to create space both with and without the ball. So why not have Pulisic through the middle and Reyna and Aronson and even others running off of them? Weah may not be valuable in this game because there's not going to be a ton of space. He may be more valuable coming off the bench. If the United States score the first goal, then Iran knows they need to chase the game, and then space opens up. I think Greg's got to be a little bit more creative with his front 4 or 5 attacking spaces, and I think it's playing a false 9 through the middle. Right now, if you ask me, I'm telling you, I think it's got to be Christian Pulisic, but I don't think he's going to do so.
What would you do, Casey?
Yeah, it is. It's one of those conundrums, right? Because I'm not a big fan of just changing for the sake of changing. I like stability in a lineup. They went very stable without having to make changes. Obviously, a lot of it will depend on what the last 3 days of rehab looked like for everybody. We knew that guys coming in didn't have a lot of match fitness. We know that they're going to need to up those energy levels again. We also know that it's an Iran side, as Taylor mentioned, feel comfortable in a low block. They feel comfortable also waiting for a team to overexpose themselves and then hit on the counter. So not only do you have to be careful with bringing in 5 or 6 really offensive-minded players who are thinking, got to get a goal, got to get a goal. Let's, keep going at them. And then having that moment where you're unbalanced, hit on the counter, and when you've had 70% possession, you find yourself a goal down, and now you're really chasing it because you got to get 2 goals to get yourself back in the game. So, yeah, Greg has to really make sure that he comes into the game with a level of stability, and then as you all have mentioned, Taylor have mentioned, there are options to come off the bench to be able to change it if need be, to be more attack-minded.
Who have you got up top, Andy?
I'm going to keep it really simple, Dan. If I need to score goals, right, and I'm the manager of this team, I look at what's available, and I pick the players who I think not only are the most talented, but who have the most ability to create in tight spaces. So then, if that's my criteria, it may not be Berhalter's, but it's my criteria in this game and the challenges that Iran present. There is no chance that if Gio Reyna is healthy, fit, and ready to go, that he's not on the field for me. Because he's one of the few players in this squad, when you look at the talent personnel, he's one of the few players in this squad that can get on those spaces. He likes to run in behind. He has that kind of ability, but he also can get in between lines, and he's strong enough and skilled enough to where he can withstand a challenge, turn, and go at a defender. And when he does that, guess who frees up? It frees up Christian Pulisic, because he's going to attract attention to him, and then Pulisic becomes a guy who's an outlet. If Pulisic attracts attention, now you have Gio Reyna, and he's an outlet. But now you don't have that. So far, what you've had is they've addressed Pulisic, they've addressed some of Tim Weah, and then down the middle, there's no threat, so we don't even have to address that. So defensively, again, it's a whole lot easier to defend if you just have a guy who's not going to give you a whole lot of productivity. Whoever that guy may be, Haji Wright and company. So for me, Gio Reyna has to play. That's as simple as I can keep it. If I'm Berhalter, Gio Reyna has to be on the field.
Taylor, obviously we know how big a game this is, and we know the youth within this side. Have they got what it takes to take this pressure?
I think so. I do. I think as much as we talk about youth and inexperience, you have to also look at Greg Berhalter in the same manner. He's very young in his managerial career. And so when you look at that, does he have the wherewithal to say, you know what, in the second half, I got to make decisions here that change the game in our favor? I don't think this game can be won in the first 15, 20 minutes. We saw it with Canada recently scoring an early goal, then absolutely getting their doors blown off by Croatia. So the United States have to be very careful. You can't win it in the first 15, but you sure as hell can lose it. And so that's where the experience that Casey Keller's talking about, and even you're asking, is where do they have that? In saying that, Dan, before this tournament started, I answered that question of inexperience of saying this. We can talk about experience, but if you're experienced with all negativity and everything's been bad, I don't want that experience. I'd rather have a young, naive, inexperienced team that's trying to create their own story and energy, for lack of a better word. And so that's why this group, sure they can, absolutely they can. But if they get punched in the face, this team, historically under Greg Berhalter, has shown the inability to react. And that's the most important thing I think everyone needs to realize here, is that if the first goal comes from the United States, that works in their favor, because then Iran has to come out from the low block, then it plays into their strengths. But if Iran get the first goal, that anxiety, that everything's going to go against the United States, that's where this could be a real difficult 90 minutes plus.
Here we go then. Let's take a look at everyone's predictions going into this tie. Is it positive or negative? Myself and Shaka See the US going home, Shane.
Oh, what?
Why do you hate America?
Controversy.
That is not the case at all. Full disclosure, I had England and Iran going through before this tournament started. And I have to admit...
You also had Argentina to win it, and you switched that very quickly.
Yes,
so.
but I'm sticking with this one. And there are a few things in terms of Iran here that made me think that they posed a significant threat. Highest ranked team in Asia, playing in region. I thought it put them in a really good position. Also, what's been happening off the field politically around Iran can work in one of two ways. It can either be detrimental to you, or it can prove to be a real inspiration. Then the England game, and I thought it was the former. And then the response against Wales. And I think that last few minutes in particular is why I think Iran get it done. They have real momentum in their side. On their side, they have a real belief about that result, what it means, and what they as a team mean to their home country. You contrast that with the US, who felt they should have gotten more against Wales, played well against England, but frustrated in the fact that they barely tested Jordan Pickford, and knew Pulisic hit the crossbar, but didn't really pose enough of a threat, and they have more questions to answer. Then we come down to the coaches, an inexperienced Berhalter up against a very experienced Carlos Queiroz, who's been here, seen it, and done it. I'm leaning Iran.
It's a hard guess, and it goes... For me, that game goes far above a normal football game in a way that, of course, we all talked about the tactic, but what's going to happen in the player's head if they score a goal or they concede a goal? That's going to be the trick for me, because you have to react. Are you in a good frame of mind to be able to react if you concede a goal, if you play too low, like maybe the United States will play at first, to react and be more positive or more above, in front, and playing, a little bit further up. That's the only question mark that I have. Are they ready to play the game of their lives? That's the answer we're going to get tomorrow.
Last word on this to you, Taylor. What's your prediction?
That's an interesting one. I am on the record, full disclosure. I said the long shot to get out of the group, the best bet was Iran. They were plus almost 10-1 odds before the tournament started to get out of the group. Now, part of that was I thought England wasn't playing well. I thought Wales was old and dead, and they were there to be had. And the United States and Iran would ultimately play in the final group stage game, and here we are. I think Frank hit the nail on the head. And in case he knows this better than anyone, but 1998... Iran versus the United States in that World Cup final group stage game, that was the biggest game of that federation's life, and they still to this day talk about that game and that win. The energy of that, what Frank is talking about, is nothing we can quantify, nothing we can put a finger on how big of a game this is for one team and how big of a game this is for another. That is the energy that I think for the United States is going to be very difficult. My gut and my brain all along has said this is a draw because the United States have struggled to score goals, and I think they're going to struggle to score goals again.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.